It's either we're all in or all out. You know, it's hard to do things halfway. And that's the beauty of doing something with your best friend, is that there's accountability there, showing up every week like clockwork.
Yeah.
And it's
And
been
you're right,
fantastic.
we're about to pass episode 100, but we only number our weekly episodes that are just kind of like recapping the ecosystem. We actually don't even number our interviews, of which we have about 50. So we're well over 100 episodes by now in the feed. But yeah, we'll be passing that 100 mark just around the 2-year anniversary of the show in January, I think.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode number 23rd. And today's guests are Will and Trinity, who are the hosts of the Waiting to Be Signed podcast and very active collectors of generative art, particularly on fxhash. So I'm very excited to have them on the show and get their perspective in the whole generative art ecosystem, but specifically about fxhash 2.0 launch. For those that aren't familiar, fxhash is launching on Ethereum, so they are integrating to the Ethereum blockchain, and that will happen on December. It will be a whole week packed with events. Over 80 artists are launching new collections, and there are so many implications, right, for artists and collectors. So I'm very, very happy to have Trinity and Will today to talk about that. How are you guys?
Doing good.
Fantastic. Thank you for having us on.
Yeah.
People who are listening, Carlo, you're one of our first guests on our show. So
Yes.
happy
Way
to
back
return
in
the
the day.
favor.
Yeah, so I was looking at the recent episodes, and you guys are about to cross 100 episodes. That's fantastic. I think the guest on episode 6, so a long time ago, very early on. So how has the journey, like, did you expect to go so far when you started? Was it a casual show, or did you took it very serious from the beginning?
I
I
think
don't
that we're
think
all
Trinity and I are
in.
casuals.
No, it's either we're all in or all out. You know, it's hard to do things halfway. And that's the beauty of doing something with your best friend, is that there's accountability there, showing up every week like clockwork.
Yeah.
And it's
And
been
you're right,
fantastic.
we're about to pass episode 100, but we only number our weekly episodes that are just kind of like recapping the ecosystem. We actually don't even number our interviews, of which we have about 50. So we're well over 100 episodes by now in the feed. But yeah, we'll be passing that 100 mark just around the 2-year anniversary of the show in January, I think.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So Waiting to Be Signed, and the name comes from fxhash, right? Can you tell us a bit about the story? What does Waiting to Be Signed mean?
Yeah, I mean, it really comes from the earliest days of fxhash, November, December, into January of 2021, when there was so much activity on the platform, so many drops and so much like flipping, and just it was a really crazy time to be around. And because at that point it was just Ciphrd still creating the platform, there were no other developers working on it. He was having a hard time keeping up with everything and just keeping it running. And so the indexer, people would go to mint a token, and all of a sudden, like, the project would mint out, there'd be people flipping, and then you'd see in the sales feed all these unsigned tokens because the indexer hadn't caught up to actually like issue the image of the art yet. And so it would say, waiting to be signed, sold for 50 Tez, waiting to be signed, sold for 100 Tez. And you would watch these people just trading unrevealed tokens because that's how hot the market was at that point. And we just thought, wow, that's a really funny name for a show.
Yeah.
At that time too, we were only doing fxhash. We've since branched out into other Ethereum platforms talking about Verse and Art Blocks and Tonic, but we stick with the name because it's just, I don't know.
Yeah, very unique.
Yeah.
Very unique. It's in the culture, right? The cultural name that will remain. And yeah, so December 1st, fxhash will open on Ethereum. It was announced a couple of months ago. And what are your thoughts? So there are, I think, multiple things to consider, right? So one is the implications of being on Ethereum, which is a different blockchain, very different than Tezos, for like things like gas, right? It's expensive on Ethereum. Also, fxhash has many features, and they are doing a great job in migrating or launching with pretty much everything right out of the gates. And there are also implications on what will happen to the previous collections that are on Tezos. Some people think it will be very, very positive for those collections because it will drive more traffic, more visibility. Others are not that sure. And of course, both will be operational. So what are your thoughts, guys? What have you thought about these? What do you think will happen in general?
Well, I think first of all, we will officially see the #1 generative art platform, open generative art platform on Ethereum finally come to life. I know that there have been a lot of open gen art platforms on Ethereum coming out. fxhash is a well-known name. They have 2 years in the business doing this on Tezos. They're going to absolutely crush it out of the gates. I have such a strong belief in this team. But to your question, I think that this is only going to be good things for the art that's been on Tezos so far. More traffic, more mind, more attention. And then, you also see this whole litany of historic projects that are historic within the community because they were early, they are excellent, and they are very tightly held. So I think that opening up the ecosystem of who can be a collector or who is a collector is only going to be good. Well, I don't know if you disagree with that.
No, I agree. And I think another point to that is that I think it's very hopeful that a lot of people from Ethereum will come over. There's so many artists that we're going to talk about in this episode that they're going to know from Art Blocks and Verse and Tonic that got their start here and have projects that are very affordable, but not necessarily cheap, but affordable compared to their other work. And someone with ETH comes over, they connect their MetaMask, they're all of a sudden going to be seeing all of these Tezos projects as well. And they're going to be able to just make a wallet pretty easily. And if they don't even want to buy Tezos, they don't have to, because fxhash allows you to pay with ETH. They allow you to pay with credit card. So if you don't want to go through all the hoops of going to Coinbase and figuring out how to buy Tez, if you only want to buy ETH, I think the barrier to entry once people connect to the site and start seeing stuff is going to be very low for collecting.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And there are so many amazing projects on the platform, and I think that's thanks to it being open, right? Basically, any artist could launch on fxhash since day one, and there are thousands of projects. And I think you guys, through your podcast, have been doing an amazing job into keeping up to date with the releases, and you are collectors as well, so you are very familiar with everything in a high scale, like all the projects that are on the platform. So I think it would be very beneficial for us to talk a little bit about that, right? Like, what are the projects that there are very popular, and there are projects that maybe aren't as popular, but there are maybe some hidden gems there. So I was thinking that a good place to start would be into the popular collections, right? What some people call the blue chips. And these days might be a good time, to look at those. And I wonder, from your perspective, from the blue chips projects, I don't really like that name, but for those, which ones are you particularly interested in these days in terms of the market, but also the ones that you actually like and appreciate a lot just from an artistic point of view?
Trinity, any place you want to start? Or should we talk about the methodology kind of first of how we're approaching this?
Yeah, we can definitely do that. And, I think the first part is that, over the last year or so, we've been tracking an index of projects. It's not necessarily the most expensive projects, but I think they're the most exciting projects. But they aren't all necessarily blue chips. But, we are over time, it used to be every week. And then as the market slowed, we went down to every month, and now a little bit checking in every quarter. Obviously, Will did another special rundown just in preparation for this to kind of see how things have been shaking out. But we always track, what is the floor price? And again, floor is not the resistance. Floor can always go lower, especially in a market like this where you're not seeing as many sales. We always track not just the price in Tez, but also the price in USD, because crypto is, it's a fluctuating thing in and of itself. And so we see a lot of repricing that may or may not occur as the price of Tez changes. And it can sometimes change quite dramatically, especially in the last year or so, where we can drop 40% overnight. So it could be a great time to get deals. But things have been pretty steady in the last couple of months, for better or for worse.
Yeah, and I'll add the caveat that, though we're tracking this, we don't have perfect analytic systems and things. We don't have our own custom API that's like reading the blockchain. So these are our best estimations based on the information that we can find through fxhash. So if anything, some of the numbers that we're going to present are probably like under, kind of like under it. Like, I don't know the perfect top for each project, but we can kind of look historically and try to guess where they were. So I'm sure anyone who's got better data skills could come up with a more perfect version of this list, but I think we're going to be within plus or minus 5% in everything that we talk about. I feel good about that, at least. So cool. I mean, should we start with the obvious one, like Zancan, do you think, Trinity?
I mean, obviously, I think it's the project that has the highest floor on fxhash. It is the #1 most traded project on the platform so far. If you look at the annual sales data or the all-time sales data, Garden Monoliths is #1. It's the top. It is the highest. And it speaks to that really in the floor price as well, which is currently 11,500 Tez. Which, in ETH terms, it's not a Fidenza, but it is the Fidenza that we have.
Yep. That is around 9,000 USD right now. So as we're recording it, Tez just dipped down to 79 cents. And so that's probably about what, a little over 4 ETH or so. So that's kind of to give you a sense, if you're an ETH collector, that's like the high watermark for what you might pay for a generative art piece in fxhash. There's plenty that are going to be much, much, much lower than that.
And just to add to that, and I mean the floor on the monoliths, $9,000. It used to be way over 15,000, right, and way over 20,000 for a long, long time, right? So we could say that it's the cheapest it's been since it's released. Am I right? I think it's the cheapest.
Probably close to that, I would say. I mean, obviously the first month or two, it wasn't that expensive, but yes, go ahead, Trinity.
No, that's exactly what I was going to say. For the first month or so, also obviously the price of Tez was much higher. Garden Monoliths came out in December of 2021, which is obviously a great time for crypto. Tez was probably around $5, obviously compared to 79 cents now. And it took a while to grow, but as the space got bigger and bigger, I think especially moving into January, February of 2022, it just kind of took off like a rocket ship. It became the piece to have. And because it is such a great example of how crazy code-based art can be. For people who haven't seen Garden Monoliths or aren't familiar with the work of Zancan, it's these crazy like landscape scenes that are like trees, it's flowers, it's grass, and it's just so unique. He has such a special style that's unique to him. You don't really see anybody else able to do anything. He has a custom JavaScript library called grass.js that really feeds into all of his work. And so he's doing something special and something unique. And this is his first, like, as far as I can tell, it's his first long form generative art project. And so there's a special like provenance there of him doing this on fxhash.
Yeah. And I'll add, just to give you some more info. So the peak happened probably, our best guess was like around June of last year, June 2022. The Tezos price was 27,000, and that equivalent in USD was $52,650 as the floor. So for one of the top projects in volume, it also has the highest sale. So La Random, which is the Funny Guys led fund and collection, bought a rare pink one for 75,000 Tez. I don't even know what the USD
at the
was
time.
at that
I don't
time.
know.
It was probably close to $100,000, if not more. But just in looking at the floors from the top to now, that delta is 80. It's down almost 83%. So you're getting an incredible discount, and a lot of that's driven by the value of Tez, and also just being a year in the bear market, right? Because if you only look at the Tez, it's only down like 50-ish%, but then you factor in, sorry, if you only look at the floor prices, it's down like 50-ish, but when you factor in the USD stuff, it gets even more severe. So that's where a lot of this discounting and like value is coming from. It's just the overall markets, and I think you just probably see a lot of similar stuff on ETH too. But
yeah, and also, I mean, when you look at the garden monoliths, if for those that are looking at supply and listings, so there are only 255 garden monoliths. That's kind of a tiny collection when you think about it. So Fidenzas, ringers, and squiggles, those are much bigger. All are over 1,000, right? So 255. That's a tiny collection, and there are only 28 listed today at the moment of the recording. So that's interesting. It's less, close to 10%, right? So it's quite a good number. So yeah, and I mean, talking about Zancan, I'll let you guys continue with your list. I appreciate the structure you guys bring to the generative art world, but he's also in the top. I mean, the top five. In we look at the volume of fxhash, he has two more collections there, right? And one with Yazid, which was a collaboration. But that's also quite impressive, right? Out of the top five, Zancan is in three of them. So that's interesting fact.
He is the artist. I mean, for the longest time, he hadn't switched over to ETH. He's a very environmentally focused person. So he didn't put any work on ETH until the proof of stake, the merge happened. Now he's done some stuff with Verse. He did his kind of like soft open edition there. He's done work with Bright Moments, and he's done a lot of other like more bespoke curated things. He had his physicals with Art Matter, which were really cool, that then ended up actually becoming an fxhash collection. But yeah, I mean, in terms of his Kindergarten Monuments is another great entry point. It's much more approachable. The floor is just around 2,000 Tez, which is only $1,500, so you're not even at an ETH there. And then A Bugged Forest, the project he released after that, which is I think the 5th in volume, is 1,000 pieces, so it was really big relative. And the floor there is only 450 Tez, which is like $350. So now you're getting into like the 0.15 ETH range. That's incredibly accessible, and all of these are still like down from their highs in that like 70 to 80% range. And so you're seeing, I think, a lot of opportunity where even if we don't get back to those all-time highs, if we only get halfway there, like you're still getting a really great deal on trying to come in on some of this stuff.
And I think, speaking to your point earlier, Carlo, like even though they might be 1,000 pieces each, it's still a lot lower than some of these other projects over on Ethereum. And I think that one of the things that Zancan is working towards is maintaining that sense of exclusivity, but also approachability. You can have a Zancan piece, you can have a Bugged Forest, which I think, it's not a collaboration. It's something that's uniquely Zancan. It's still long form. And it's something that is, I think, Bugged Forest specifically is a little bit more unique in his overall set of projects that he's released elsewhere, because it is something that was supposed to be bugged. It's not just a bugged forest because it's a forest with bugs. It's like literal came out of bugs within the code. And so it is a little bit different. It is special. It is unique. And so at that really approachable price point of, 450 Tez, I don't know if you can really go wrong there. It was such a great moment when that project came out. And, I think that he's one of the top, he's obviously like one of the top artists on the platform, if not the top.
Yeah, it was a kind of a surprise drop, right? I remember I minted one, but he announced it over Twitter, and I think it was open for mint like 30 minutes after, right? So it was pretty unexpected, and it was, I'm not sure, maybe you guys know, was it before or after Kindergarten Monuments?
It was after. Yeah. He released it from a heavy metal festival in Italy, like tethering his laptop to his phone. There was a great picture on Twitter of him uploading it, and it's a great piece. And like Trinity said, it's distinct in how it's kind of composed with a lot more glitchiness to it, but you still get a lot of the great like leaves and stuff that he's known for. But we got to move on because we got so many so many of these to do.
What's the next one? What's the next one in your list?
The next one is probably a name that a lot of ETH collectors know because he's put work on art blocks. He's put work on Verse most recently. Had a release with LACMA recently too. So this is William Mapan. I think he's probably he's really, really well known in ETH, but people might not know that he got his start on fxhash. He has one collection here and one long rumored collab that has yet to materialize. That's been over a year in the making. We'll see if that ever comes out. But his project Dragons released in December 2021. So still within the first 6 to 8 weeks of fxhash. The floor, it's not down as much as other projects. Williams had so much attention in other platforms and other collecting communities. But the floor right now is 4,000 Tez, which is about $3,100, down from a high of 7,250 Tez, which is more around $8,000. So you're still getting like a 60% discount there from the all-time high from an artist who's, I think, a lot of people's picks to be like in a museum 20 to 30 years from now. So definitely worth checking out. I think this will be honestly between Mapan and Zancan. I think these are like the first two stops for anyone who's coming over from ETH and looking for like truly blue chip projects. I mean, there's so many people that we love, but like I can't imagine I can't imagine collectors going deeper on our list first. I don't know if you disagree, Trinity.
I think that's absolutely right. Not only are they really established artists now, it's their first long form generative art pieces that have been like publicly available. It's something from the early days of fxhash, as you said. And it really just kind of shows, the starting point for what has turned out to be like an amazing trajectory for both of these artists. So yeah. Dragons is absolutely iconic. For a while there, it was above Garden Monoliths, I think at the start. And it's maintained, that trajectory overall. Fun note is I actually minted one of the rarest dragons, and I do still have the highest all-time sale. It was around 25,000 Tez, which unfortunately has since, or fortunately, has since been reinvested into almost fully into other pieces on fxhash. But
yeah, that's a great story. I mean, it's great when you can have this kind of big sales, and then you have this liquidity, right, to buy more art. It's a great feeling, and you can distribute, kind of reorganize your portfolio. So yeah, no, that's Dragons. It's an amazing collection, and an interesting fact about William is that he has released works with pretty much all the staple platforms, galleries, marketplaces, which is very impressive when you think about the time frame. It's around 2 years, and also these aren't like open platforms, right? These are curated platforms. When you think about art blocks, when you think about Proof, Verse, as you mentioned, LACMA. Also, he was auctioned at Sotheby's. So it's very impressive how in a short amount of time he has done so many high quality collaborations, right, with other galleries and marketplaces. And yeah, Dragons is the first one. It's his genesis, right? So that's
it is
very important.
And a lot of people, I mean, obviously biased, but a lot of people who collected him early still favorite above his other projects. I think people who probably encountered his Art Blocks project first might enjoy that most, or maybe people who collected on Tonic might prefer that most. But Dragons is very distinct. It doesn't really do what he's kind of doing now, which is more focused on like that kind of painterly style. It's a little more innately digital, I think, but still has just a lot of that like signature refinement that William is known for. So definitely check that one out. I think that's stop 1A or 1B for people.
I think the other thing to really notice or note about Mapan is that although he has all of these big projects out there with all these big platforms, he's still very careful with how he releases. He doesn't release outside of these big drops, and so there isn't a ton of his work out there, so to speak. Even his latest project on Verse Sketchbook, okay, that's only 64 editions. So, there's just not much William to be had. It's almost all long form generative. And so, if you had to pick something to hold on for a long time, I think that this is one of the projects that would be able to maintain some of that value over the course of decades.
And based on the interview we just did with him a few weeks ago, I don't think we're going to see very much from him next year either. It kind of sounds like he's planning to take a big break right now. He had a huge end to 2023, a lot of projects all releasing, and he did quite well. So I don't think he's under a financial burden to keep going at least for another year or two. He's got a kid, so we might not see something from him unless there's a really special opportunity that comes along. So I think for collectors going back and seeing like his Genesis project being also one of his most affordable projects, that's a great opportunity there.
Yeah, there are many reasons to collect and follow the art of William Mapan. And yeah, that's a second project on your list.
I think we can move faster through the rest of these because they're going to be a little lesser known.
But we can also, we don't have to go through all of them. Maybe at the end we can name the ones we couldn't discuss, right? Just for the sake of completeness. But so which one is the third one in your list of blue chips?
Yeah, I think we can't not mention RGB Elementary Cellular Automaton by the fxhash founder Ciphrd. It is one of Ciphrd's very few projects that's been out there. He's only released 3 so far, despite being the founder of the platform. He's just too busy coding. But RGB, as it's commonly called, it is the third project on the platform. It's like the first non-fxhash project on the platform. And so it kind of has that amazing story of being like that Squiggle. It's the founding piece by the founder. It's super early. It was a free mint. It took a couple of days to mint out as well, if I recall correctly. And this is one of those projects where, it's not about being the best art or the most complex code, but it's about like that story and like the cultural legacy that it will have, just for being that Squiggle of this platform. From a pricing point of view, it's currently the floor of 950 Tez, which is down from a peak of about 2,500 Tez, again, midpoint last year. And so we're seeing quite a bit of fluctuation, down almost 85%. I have to say that a lot of that is due to some recent capitulation by some very big holders who are looking to move their portfolio around.
One in particular. Yeah.
Yes.
I think the silver lining there, though, so there's one collector in particular who bought up 10% of the collection over time. So owned 100 of 1,000 of these things, having missed the mint and coming to the platform later. And there was always this kind of concern in the community, well, what happens when they start to sell? And he's picked now to start selling for reasons that, we think we can't really speculate on. We don't know why, right? No one usually says. But the good news is that there's actually been like a ton of demand for the pieces that he's listing. They're not even really being listed. People are making offers to him and he's accepting them. So I think that's a really good sign that there's someone who potentially wants to move 10% of this collection and the community is all stepping forward and be like, yeah, I want one. Yeah, give it to me. Like, I'm going to hold it. There's a lot of people who are priced out of it. In Tezos terms, people are used to paying 10, 20, maybe 50 or $100 USD for a mint. So when a project's floor is like 2,000 to 3,000, the average collector over here isn't in a position to like buy one. So when all of a sudden they go on discount like that, people view it as an opportunity. And like I said, RGB is very much the Squiggle. It's just the piece that you want to have,
Yeah. Yeah, totally. And the first 2 collections, for those that are unaware, were the logos, right? Were the fxhash logos.
Yeah.
Which were also made by Ciphrd. They were released on their fxhash.
A different wallet name. Yeah.
Different wallet name. So this is the official, as you said, like the first generative art collection of fxhash associated with fxhash. And yeah, I was looking at the activity, and the last 24 hours we have seen a crazy amount of the movement, which, as you said, that means there is a lot of demand, and it seems like the right time, right, to to get one of these, particularly because Ciphrd is also going to release a new piece. I'm not sure, maybe you guys know, but I think will be the first one on Ethereum, right? So he will also launch the first collection on fxhash integration with Ethereum. So I think it's like a good cycle, right? And if we think about it, it's 1,000 pieces, but also it's not 10,000, right? So it's still tiny collection when you think about it.
Yep.
So yeah, a big fan of RGBs, and Ciphrd has, I think, two more iFrames and
Ethereal Microcosm, which is one of my top 3 favorite projects on the platform. I know it's not officially on our list. I actually need to go and look at some of the pricing info right now, but it is such an insane project to open up and look at. It's animated. It is like looking at something under a microscope, and you see all these different types of like organic bacterial life forms that are interacting with each other, and it runs indefinitely. It is, it's generative. It is, every time you run it, it will run in the same way. And it just, if you keep it open for 30 days, going from the first time when it starts and seeing like how all the organisms have been interacting with each other for 30 days, I think it's my favorite piece on the platform. I have to say, really cool. I just want to get a tiny little square to hang on a wall and just kind of check in, every so often to see how it's going. It's like having like an ant farm.
Powerful browser though, or
correct
processor, because it is not trivial to run it, especially over time as the system accumulates. But we're checking out for sure.
Current floor is 888 Tez. I think it's his best work by far, Ciphrd's best work. So we'll just shout that out. It's a surprise shout out, but something definitely not to miss.
That's go ahead.
I was just going to jump to another artist if you're cool. I think another artist that we should talk about is someone who actually, relative to everyone else on the list, pretty much their floors have held up incredibly well due to a lot of recent interest and activity. So Kim Asendorf, who has like 5 different collections on fxhash, ranging from the earliest days in November 2021 to the end of last year when there was the Herbert Franke tribute, this project Zoom. He gained a lot of traction this year amongst the ETH community because of his art blocks curated release Cargo, which has now been like progressively more and more accumulated as people are figuring out how cool it is. But he has one of the first projects on the platform reading a book. It's 1,000 pieces. It took it a long time to mint out. It wasn't free. And other cool projects like Transactions, Monogrids, Nazca, Zoom, we already mentioned. All of these kind of available at a spectrum of like affordable costs. So reading a book you can get for 400 Tez, which is like $300. But that's actually not that far down from its all-time high, where it was 320 Tez and $362 when Tez was more expensive.
The current price is actually the peak, I think, is what we're saying there.
It's very close to it. Whereas his other projects like are down 30 to 40% from their all-time highs. But it's kind of interesting to see. I think he's a really great example of someone who maybe will foretells what might happen as more people come over here, because we've seen a lot more interest in his work since Cargo as it's been picked up, and we've seen like groups like Carpe Diem and Flamingo DAO and all those big collectors kind of scoop it up. So I think that we could see more of that happening for some of these projects that are like much further down. It's kind of like too hard to get into his work because it's so like, if you've seen Cargo, it's like you got to kind of sit with it and look at it, very cerebral, but definitely worth checking those projects out, or at least talking about as like where things might go for some of these other people.
And he's also an absolute pioneer, not just within like the NFT space. He is a known artist prior to the proliferation of NFTs. And that's primarily due to some of his insane magic with pixel sorting. Like he kind of pioneered some major pixel sorting algorithms. And so if you're looking to have like an established, air quotes, artist, and not just somebody who became big within the last 3 years, I think that, he is definitely a name to hold on to, for being just very large within the generative art space. which obviously has a much longer history than the couple of years that we've been really focused on it from a market perspective.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I'm a big fan of Kim. I own some of his pieces on fxhash. I think I own from multiple collections Zoom, reading a book. And yeah, what you mentioned is very unique, right? Reading a book is actually going up. And that's not common at all, right? When we think about generative art and what has happened over the past 2 years. So that's, to me, that sounds like a great indicator of interest, right, into what Kim is doing. And yeah, just Zoom, which, as you mentioned, was released for the Hilbert Frankie tribute. It's only 128 pieces, right? So it's very tiny, a very tiny collection. And that when I got lucky over Twitter, so Kim was giving out some, I think it was allow list spots, and I was lucky to comment, and I got one through one of those allow lists, which was very at the time it was very lucky because 128 pieces is very small for a Kim. So yeah, I'm happy to have one of those. And yeah, Kim, one of the masters of pixel sorting algorithms. So if you are into that. And one final point, I've seen some of his work in huge displays, like very high quality displays. And I think that's how you're supposed to look at his work, right? That's how he designs it. High quality, huge displays, and then you can see all the small pixels. It's fantastic.
Where to next, Trinity?
Maybe what we can do is then go back to one of our fxhash favorites who really got I would say his big start on fxhash. He's obviously since gone and moved to a bunch of other platforms, but that is msoriaro. Marcelo Soria-Rodriguez, I guess would be his formal name. And he has one of the favorite pieces on fxhash, or one of the favorite projects in Contrapuntos. It was an early project number 65. It's around 700-ish editions. And if you ask most people, like, what project do you want to have because you enjoy it or you think it's cool, it's almost always going to be Contrapuntos. People like Garden Monoliths because it's grass.js, it's Zancan, it's super unique. But Contrapuntos is definitely doing something that feels much more natively digital. And it is just very iconic. Dragons is also iconic in its own way, but this is something where if you see a piece that's Contra, it's Contra. I would say that in my mind, it's the Fidenza or the Ringers of fxhash.
Yeah, I think
that
so.
Might be a
In terms of
point.
No, I think
it's an icon.
Of collectors, it's an icon. I think a lot of collectors think of it as like the quote unquote best long form piece because it's a longer set. Like you said, it's like over 700. It's early, it's iconic, it's well collected. The diversity is there, but it does that thing where when you look at a bunch of them, like it's very obvious they're from the same code. It like hits every single mark that you want from a long form piece. And it was, released back in the day when there wasn't there wasn't collector curated, there wasn't params, there wasn't a lot of like all of this new stuff that people do now to kind of make, an algorithm work and pleasing to collect. It's like, nope, this is it. Yeah. I'm confident in the algorithm, 700 something pieces. And he's obviously gone on to do other things. Like he did Entre Tiempos with art blocks. And I'm trying to think, he's also done some stuff with like the Kate Voss Gallery, Bright Moments. Yeah. So he's been on Verse. So he's been to a bunch of other ETH platforms in a curated fashion. But he still jumps back in. He's got other much more affordable projects on fxhash as well, but Contra is the one to talk about. And looking...
Tucara, actually, right? So Tucara is another one that was a collaboration with Andreas Rau.
Yes.
And I think that's special. It has the sound, right? The music, the composition, and it keeps evolving, right? So I think that for me, that's also, when I think about mSoria, I think about Contras, how they call it, Contras, and also Tucara as well.
Yeah. I think they're both top 5 projects for me on the platform. I think my top 5 project list has about 15 projects in it.
Yeah,
But they're all like, they're both super iconic. Toccata is obviously that collaboration piece, but it's also getting to be much more accessible in terms of pricing. Toccata has a current floor price of 600, which is very, very accessible, and it's something that brings great enjoyment. There's a lot of collectability, and it's something where it's, it is, every single time you load it, it's going to be the same, but it's not going to be exactly the same, because it's how it's performing is based off of the time now. Yeah. And so it's kind of this story throughout time. Most generative art, if it's animated, it will start from the beginning every single time you run it. But there's such a temporal aspect to Toccata. It's these undulating waves of growth and decay. And, you're really able to see that in place. It's never going to be the same every single time you look at it, which to me makes it a really beautiful piece on the overall platform.
We did an entire episode with the two of them just talking about how they made that project and the collaboration. Like, we usually don't do episodes that specific, but we're so enthralled by this piece. It's so unlike everything else in fxhash. Also worth noting, by the way, for a lot of people who are coming over from ETH, where there is this general on-chain maximalism there, a project like Toccata could never be done on-chain. It would be too expensive. It would be prohibitively expensive to do it because it uses a lot of recorded audio pieces that probably go into the megabytes. So fxhash, will be adding on-chain and has added it for Tezos already, and will be adding it for Ethereum when that's integrated. But by and large, 99% of the projects in fxhash are they store the hashes on chain, but then they're storing the actual code on a service called IPFS, and there's up to a 30 megabyte limit there. And so I think that will be a really interesting thing to see, because often when we look at projects in fxhash, they do a lot more because they're not being constrained by this idea that it has to all fit on chain. Every kilobyte of code is going to cost you potentially $100, it does when people do these Ethereum drops. So it really shows, I think, more of the breadth of possibility in generative art than you're kind of getting on ETH. And so hopefully that difference is not going to be a disqualifier for people. I hope that they kind of look at it and they embrace the fact that generative art can exist beyond just what can fit on chain.
Yeah.
And I think that speaks to,
Go ahead.
I think that speaks to kind of two different views that sometimes people have on generative art. Some people are more about how simple can this be? How optimized can this code be? Often when you think about a Peter Pasima, who will do anything he can to reduce the amount of code that there could possibly be. And that's part of the art. That's where the code is part of the art. But, with the larger file size on IPFS, I think it allows for a much larger range of artistic expression. And so you're able to kind of look at generative art across kind of these two main points of code versus meaning. And obviously there's a lot of overlap between these things. You don't need to buy into one or the other. But I think it speaks to the breadth that exists within the generative art world overall.
Yeah, and just want to make a small break to remind everybody that all the collections, all the artists that we are mentioning will be. You can find the links to the description of the episode, so you can easily access them. Because I know we are mentioning many names, many collections, and it can be tricky to find them. So just go to the description, and you can find a direct link to the different collections we're talking about. Also, on the ones on the other blockchains, not necessarily on fxhash. So that's a great point what you mentioned about on chain and off chain, and there are different perspectives. I think there are, as you said, pros and cons of both, and I like both. I think it's good to have both options. Artists that want to explore and put on more challenging projects like Toccata, but also this concept of having everything on chain is special, right? For validation, it also brings some, as you said, constraints, right, when creating the project. So both, I think, are interesting. And yeah, we can maybe go on, guys. What's the next one on your list?
Yeah, I think we need to push to go into our hidden gem section soon, but I think just let's talk about both of these together because they're also names I think people are going to know and might be surprised to know that they have projects on Tezos. But Lars Wander, who's huge now on the Ethereum side, along with Iskra Belichkova and Zach Lieberman. So Zach only has one project. It's collab with Iskra called Horizontes, and Iskra has two now because she just released one recently, Pieces on fxhash, but the one that we have flagged here is Uninhabitable, which is back from December 2021. And then Lars has a bunch of projects from the early beta, Gossamer, Unfolded, and Geode, from 2021 into January 2022 before he went off into Ethereum and got picked up by Artix Code and became super famous. So all those projects, again, are all projects that are extremely approachable. Like the Lars pieces, Gossamer, his very first project, his Genesis long form piece, can be had for 149 Tez, which is $117. If you can imagine buying a Lars Wander piece for $117 on ETH, like, no, I don't think it was ever even that inexpensive. Yeah. Unfolded similarly is $150. These are down from highs, 60 to 70%. Geo $300, and the Iskra stuff, Uninhabitable, is 650 Tez, which is $500. Horizontes is 850 Tez, $671. So all sub 1 ETH or sub 1 ETH, like very affordable pieces here from artists who command, multiples of that on Ethereum.
Yeah, those are great additions. And yeah, Lars, as you mentioned, very popular on Ethereum. He also was on Bright Moments, right? So also recently had a release with Tonic, if I remember correctly.
Rhythm and the Machine, yeah. Which came with physicals, and so he's I think he's going to be doing a lot more stuff with physicals, and obviously he's got kind of like representation. He's going to continue to be pushed out there, and building a very dedicated collector base. So I mean, there's others on this list, but we could jump to Yazid. People know him for his Ethereum work, most notably
Automatism on art blocks,
right?
Yeah.
But he has a bunch of projects on fxhash, his earliest work, and Melissa Wiederrecht also, who's put a bunch of stuff on fxhash while she was waiting for her art blocks piece to go through all of the steps to actually get up and approved, and they're not necessarily quick. And so while she was waiting, she pounded out a couple of her technically first long form releases there. So those, I think that's kind of like the list of people who you'll probably know from ETH. And then I don't know, Trinity, do you think we should jump into some of like more of our favorites and the maybe more undiscovered folks on the ETH side?
Yeah, let's do that.
Yeah, maybe just a quick comment on Yazid, right? Because he was the first artist I collected on fxhash. I collected the hashed arts, and hash cities is one of my favorite projects, right? I really enjoyed that one. And yeah, we already mentioned that he collaborated with Zancan, right, on garden monuments, kindergarten monuments. So I think those are, in my opinion, 3 of his iconic fxhash collections. I also like Lost Twins. It's very minimal, right? Very minimal. And Melissa also, she's a part of the community, the premium community, and yeah, big fan of what she's doing. Also, she has gotten very popular, right, on Ethereum. Yeah, now excited about your hidden gems. So we covered basically the kind of the popular artists, the known artists on ETH, and also we look at the volume, right? What was like the top 20-30 projects. So that's what we have been commenting on. And now we'll talk about your kind of your hidden gems, right? What you think are artists that deserve, or collections that deserve more attention. So that's exciting. What's is it a long list, guys? Is it? I
you know
guess
us, yes.
Huge.
It's a long list and yet unjustifiably short. I mean, we could have done 100 easily here, but we probably won't get to all of them because I know we've blown up your whole schedule for this thing, Carlos.
No, but it's I have no problem. I really enjoy this discussion. But maybe we can jump into like your top hidden gems, and
Go,
again,
Trinity.
if we cannot finish, we can name the rest of names.
I think of some of these people who are the hidden gems. A lot of them are really maybe not so hidden or on the verge of having huge breakouts. There are a couple that come to mind, but I think the first person I want to discuss is Ivona Tao, who is very, very well known for her generative AI work. She's been at Sotheby's on the Kate Vast AI platform. Her work has been displayed in Times Square, like on the giant screens there. I think that she's a very well-known artist within this space, but I don't know how many people know that she's actually released some of this long-form generative work that includes her AI components here over on fxhash. Her first project, Study of Atom, it is only 72 Tez, which is an insanely low price for an artist of that much caliber. Down from a high of 310. So again, when we're talking about our discounts, it's over 90% off in USD terms, not necessarily Tez terms. But, it's a very accessible project. It is pretty well listed, and it's one of the projects that you can definitely get on collection offer probably pretty easily. But, her other big project I want to shout out here is Mythic Latent Glitches, which came out last summer, so summer 2022. Again, incredibly accessible floor of 80 Tez, but this is one that, it's technically image composition, which means that there are images that have been uploaded that have then had like code-based effects applied to them. But, when it comes to like fxhash and her work, it's not like, oh, I took photographs or like I took images from the internet and I'm applying effects. This is part of a very long process for her where she spent quite a bit of time, in her native Lithuanian forest, like near where her parents live, taking tons of photographs, training AI models on the photographs of those forests, ultimately creating a curated set of these are the images that I want to use, and then like leveraging those as kind of the baseline for her work. So not only are you getting something that is like was a generative code effect, you're getting something that also has that generative AI and not just, oh, I went to Midjourney and did stuff. Yeah. It's the training of the models. It is like leveraging her own expertise in the space. She just recently completed her PhD in artificial intelligence. So she's, at the forefront of everything that's happening here. And so I think that her career is just getting started. And so these are both very accessible pieces that you should have. I think everybody should have one or two. I can't
out of
scream
respect
about
for the
Ivona loud
listeners.
enough.
Yeah, we've had her on. I think, Carlo, you had her on actually recently.
Yeah.
But we had her on early last year, and out of respect for your listeners, I have not put any collection offers in on these projects, even though I was super tempted to as I pulled together the data for this, because I was like, oh, this is way too cheap for her work. But I'll promise to not collect until at least the episode airs and people have had time to digest it.
Yeah, to me, like as you mentioned, Trinity, the fact that she's one of the first to combine AI and what we call generative art or AI and code art into one collection, I think that's quite special. Yeah, I agree. Actually, I didn't know the floors were that low at the moment, so that's a great find for me.
Yeah. I think, piggybacking off Ivona, we should talk then about Thomas Noya, who's another artist who's done a lot of the same and was recently featured at the Bright Moments in Argentina. With the project he did in Argentina was code-based, but it was actually him doing a code-based project that kind of really looks like a lot of the glitched and dithered AI stuff that he's known for from his earliest projects in fxhash. Similar to Ivona, he does photography, trains models. His outputs end up being very different because he's a lot more focused on really glitching them like crazy to the point where you can really not necessarily even tell what the underlying images are supposed to be, except for maybe if you read some of his descriptions. So he's got a ton of really affordable stuff on fxhash. He has a verse project and then now Bright Moments. So I feel like he falls into that category too, of someone who's very much like on the upswing and just now breaking into the ETH community. And I'm excited for people to discover the stuff that he has on fxhash.
Yeah, I'm also a big fan of Thomas. I collaborated with him through the Blind Gallery in a collection called Ciudad Central, which is, I'm biased, but to be honest, it's one of my favorite pieces on the platform. From Thomas, it's an amazing one. It has a strong story to his background. He's originally from Venezuela. He lives in New York, but it's inspired by the a little bit of the culture and the history of the country. So it's a very nice one for those from South America. I think you will enjoy that one.
Good shout out there. Trinity, you want to pick another?
Yeah, I'm going to go up to Eric Swan, who is a generative artist, but I believe an architect first. And he's really, again, one of those people who's on the upswing. A lot of his fxhash work actually has, I would say, higher floors than a lot of what we've looked at. But I think that is partially due to the insane quality of the work that he's been putting out on fxhash. He has a lot of work. It's Farb Taylor is not his first project. He has a couple that or before that. But it also released December 2021, actually on the exact same day as Garden Monoliths. That was a very exciting day in generative art. And this has a floor of 350 Tez right now. It hit a peak of 650. And, this project, I think, is very quintessential generative art to me. It is leveraging amazing colors, amazing palettes, and then just the way that he constructs these pieces it's very Yazid-like for people who might be familiar with some of Yazid's work. But Farb Taylor is just something special in the way that it creates 3D structures that are flat. It would be a great candidate for like generative embroidery, I would say. And it's a style that he has taken into other work that he has other places. So Punked Welt is a more recent project that he's done on fxhash, where it's, again, a very similar architectural look and feel. And, he's taken that into verse as well with Fields and Functor, which I think are some of his most prominent works. Fields was such an exciting day on verse that was collector curated. But I think that people forget that, he had his really big start on fxhash.
Yeah. And I think we have to shout out the editorial that Monk Antony wrote about Farb Taylor for Tender. So for anyone who's coming over and interested from this show, a great place, aside from looking in the notes and all the projects that we're talking about, a really good place for you to get your start exploring all of the great projects, the iconic projects on fxhash is tender.art. I guess disclosure, we're all members. We're in the Tender Discord together. But one of the things they do is they allowed community members to write editorials, and Monk Antony, who's working on the generative art timeline with Lorandom right now and is kind of becoming a professional art historian, it feels like, wrote an amazing piece about this, comparing it to like all the Bauhaus influences, and very much worth checking that out and just checking out Tender in general, because it's an amazing resource. There's also ETH stuff there too, so maybe you already have seen it, but you can filter and just look at fxhash and just like get familiar with all of the iconic projects that have been released over the last 2 years.
Yeah, it's kind of Tender. As you said, I'm also a member, and it feels like, I think the way how it started is because there was the need for curation, right? Since fxhash was an open platform, so that's what Tender brought to the community, right? Brought a big community of curators. I think that's a way to say it. And now they have this list that is a huge list of icons, right? Which are now not only fxhash collections, also Ethereum collections. So it's a great way to get a glance, right, of top projects for those that are new to the generative art scene.
Okay, one I want to do now is, and of course Trinity knows what's coming up, but Coronado by Jerez.
Yeah.
Jerez, we've had Jerez on the show for an interview. They're also one of the earliest like artists on the platform from way back in like November, December, January. Lots of projects and just an amazing artist to watch how they've evolved their practice and grown. And I feel like Coronado was the first really big breakthrough on fxhash, their first project that really ballooned up in floors. We had a high of 635 Tez at its peak, which was almost $800. It's now down to 340 Tez, which is under $300. So you're still getting that like 60-ish% discount. But most notably, Jerez this year, actually pretty recently in the last 3 months, released a really successful art blocks curated piece called Torrent, which minted out at over an ETH, which is like pretty crazy for 2023. Even on art blocks curated, most projects were minting out well below an ETH, even going down to the bottom tier before finding their audience who was willing to mint them. So the price is not there anymore. The floor is below an ETH now, but we still see them going through the sales feed, and that project's phenomenal. But Coronado is
Torrent. Sorry to interrupt, Will, but Torrent was curated. Was it the art blocks curated? Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It was like 2 projects ago or 3 projects ago at this point. And so I think for people who are coming over, if you enjoyed Torrent, like I think Coronado should be your first stop here. It's not animated, but it is a very striking piece, and it really shows how well Jerez can command like composition and color. And I have 3 of them, printed and hung in my home. They look amazing. So
Jerez, a big fan also. Go ahead, Trinity.
Sorry. I think the other thing not to miss with Jerez's work is the write-ups as well. Jerez is one of those people who goes to great care and great lengths to describe the story of every project that's created, how it's made, why it's made, like the feeling behind it. And so to my mind, like if you skip out on reading the write-ups, you're missing out on like the half the story. So that is just one thing I'll call out for anybody who's looking to appreciate or collect anything by Jerez. Coronado specifically, there's a story about like a guitar that they had since childhood, and or was exposed to since childhood, and it's the storytelling to me that gets me every time.
He also has an alt account, right, where he has released a couple of projects. I don't remember the name, but I know I own some of his alt account pieces. I'm not sure if you guys remember.
Can't speak to that.
No,
it's not. No, can't speak to. It's bad form. We're not.
It's not a. No, I think he openly said it. No?
Oh, maybe. I know that. So there's one that's like a Creative Commons one. That's like image comp. It's called like CC0.
That one.
Something.
Yeah.
But there's other rumored alts for Jerez. Jerez is rumored to have many alts, and so we don't confirm or deny anything that other rumors out there.
Yeah, but the CC0, that's he openly said it says there in the bio, Jerez alt account. So yeah, that's the one I was referring to.
Okay.
So I'm going to go for a different tack right now. And, a lot of the work that we've talked about so far is very notable because high floors, people love it, yada, yada, yada. The next artist that I'm going to call out here is Casey Reese, who is very well known within the generative art space, one of the creators of the processing language. So obviously a all caps big deal. But people who may not know, or maybe people who are new to fxhash, Casey did release a series of 5 projects on fxhash. They were all 1,000 editions, around 1 Tez each. I think that price increased over time. But it's in all those pieces, or all those projects, were odes to classic generative artworks by Vera Molnar, and so on and so forth. And it's a way to accessibly have a piece of that Reese pie, so to speak. And obviously there's an upcoming work on the fxhash calendar that will be coming up shortly with the 1.0 or the 2.0 release.
Yeah, and I think it's together with Bitforms Gallery. Yeah, Casey was in the show. He told us about processing, and I mean all his whole career, his teaching. So that's a great episode. If anybody wants to learn more about Casey, I think it's episode 8.
And I think all of these pieces, by the way, we didn't put the numbers down because they're not expensive, but I think they're all probably 50 Tez or less, and probably on offer even lower. So we're really talking like $20, $30, $40 to own a piece by Casey, who was just featured in like the coded retrospective at LACMA, not just on the website to be collected, but like in the museum. I saw it, like they filled a hallway with projections of his work there. So this is someone who's already been in museums and is considered kind of part of the canon of code-based art. To be able to buy a one of X from him, I mean, that's just crazy, right? All right, I'm gonna go a different track here and talk about a piece that is kind of in the RGB-ish category, I think, of like a piece of the culture more than necessarily a piece of art, which is Small Skulls by Mark Knoll. And when we were tracking our index last year, it was the best performing piece of 2022. Small Skulls. If you had bought Small Skulls early, this is a PFP project. It's a really early piece. It was like, I think it was project number, what did I say? 14 on the platform. Project number 14. So that's within the first day or two of the platform opening. Mark released a generative code-based PFP project called Small Skulls, 1,000 pieces. It took them a while to mint out because there weren't that many people using the platform back then. But now it's kind of become the thing where probably every third or fourth person in fxhash Discord uses a small skull as their little icon. You see them all over Twitter as well. If you follow fxhash collectors and artists, it's the official, unofficial PFP of fxhash. There's no utility to it. There's no roadmap. It's just a piece of art, but it's really grown its own organic community around it. And they're at an incredible discount, just like everything else we've talked about here. Let me just scroll to where it is. So we clocked the highest floor for Small Skulls at 400 Tez, which was almost $800 at the time back in June. It's now 155 Tez, which is only $125, and you can probably get it even lower on offer. So you're seeing that 80% drop. I think for people who collect on ETH and probably got started in PFPs, like you, Kahlo, might come over and look at this and see not only one of the very first projects in fxhash, but also like that so many people in the Discord are using this. So I think it's a good place to look right now before 2.0 comes over, or even shortly after it launches, because if you get hooked, like it's kind of the thing that shows that you're a part of it, right?
Yeah. And there are two, right? There is the ASCII's small schools, and then the OG. Is it the OG schools?
There's the 3D, there's the ASCII,
the 3D,
and then there's like I'm only talking about the regular one.
The regular.
Actually, it was 2,000. I think I misspoke. It was 2,000 pieces.
It's
right?
2,000.
Yeah. So this is the very first one. He's done a lot of derivative stuff over the last 2 years with it, including there's going to be a collab coming up. There's going to be an ode to Small Skulls also with the launch of 2.0. But I think by and large, people regard just this Small Skull project as like the one to own.
No, big fan. I've also collaborated with Mark and for the
Blind
Gallery.
The art, right?
The membership token. And Mark is amazing. I mean, he's an amazing developer, and he can put together these concepts, right, that are not typical for generative art, right, like memberships, tickets. He has also the Small Skulls super fan collection, right? If you had if you're a collector of I think it was 5 of his collections, then you get the super fan stamp or pass. I don't remember the exact name,
which I don't think he ever did anything with, but you got one.
You got one. You got I think it was a claim or an airdrop. It's in the platform as well on fxhash. And looking forward to his upcoming collaboration on the launch week.
And Mark is also just a fantastic community member. You know, he's built tools and like analytics things for the fxhash community, you know, especially early in the days when, you know, you had to do everything by hand or like do a lot of blockchain investigation by hand. You know, Mark came through and made some excellent just sites and tooling for people. So fantastic community member, and somebody to, I think, just pay attention to, and very beloved.
Yeah. And I think he hasn't released on ETH, right? So it's
I don't think so.
Yeah, so this will be interesting, right? Because we have seen so many artists that started on fxhash and eventually, moved to ETH, but Mark hasn't, for some reason, hasn't done that, and this will be his genesis, I believe. I could be wrong. We have to check.
Yeah, it was his genesis. I mean, it's hard to beat Project 14. So
Yeah.
No, but I mean on ETH, his genesis on ETH. I think this.
the new one, yeah.
The new one, yeah.
Should we kind of like wrap it up with some closing statements, Carlos? What do you think? I know we missed a ton of stuff on our list, Trinity, but
I think maybe
that
we
was
can do
the
quick
heavy hitters.
Yeah. Should we mention maybe a couple of names that maybe we don't have the time to go through? Maybe a couple of the from your list, and then we can wrap it up.
Yeah.
So,
sure. I mean, you go ahead, Trinity. You go first.
Big name that I think that probably could have been in like the blue chip section, but Andreas Rau has released 3 amazing projects on fxhash. Well known within the art space, kind of alongside like the Kim Asendorfs of the world, longtime creator. Have to shout Gieson out here. Don't skip those projects. Towers, Device One, and Smooth Steps, all pieces of perfection.
Yeah, and I will shout out an interesting one here, Cyril Diagni, who is the one who's rumored to be working, or actually confirmed to be working with William eventually on hopefully their return to fxhash with a collaboration. But he has a really cool project called Waxing Crescents, which is an AI kind of GAN project based on moon cycles. But the interesting thing about that one is, unlike what Avona does or Thomas does, where they're taking images and loading them in, he fit the entire GAN model into the 30 megabyte cap on fxhash. And I think he was the first artist to do that. There's another artist who does that called Pixel Filler, which makes really cool stuff too. So the entire model's there. There's like, that's a very unique thing, very difficult to execute. The project itself is really cool. So check out that one. That's called Waxing Crescent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great name. Yeah.
I would also shout out Ana Lucia, who is a Dutch artist who's really been, I think, on the up and up in the last couple of months, in the last year or so. Her project on fxhash, Art for Walls and Public Spaces, is one that's really not to miss. And it's a fantastic piece of work. And she's just been on this crazy trajectory, releasing things on her own, part of galleries, everything like that. And she has another big piece coming to fxhash with 2.0 as well. So
it's not in the calendar.
Love Ana Lucia.
I believe it is. Yeah.
It was delayed, right? I think it was supposed to be released before the launch, but then it was delayed, and now people are waiting. Yeah, everybody's waiting for the date, the announcement. So also collaborated with Anna and for the blind gallery. There is a very special piece there that, because of how it worked, the blind gallery in our early editions, artists minted from an alt wallet, so it's hard to find. It's called the Secret Garden, so it's a great piece, and if you do some digging, you will find it. You can find it in the Blind Gallery website. But that's a very unique piece from Ana Lucia.
Another one to shout out is Roxanne, who you can see behind me here. I have a print from him from his most recent release, Fold, with Grailerstau. But he also was someone who came to the platform super, super early. He has some of the earliest projects like Bingo, and really broke through again and again with the community. But I think is best known for his project Tick, which is also incredibly affordable, just like everything else on the list right now. And he's also been has got projects in Verse, like I said, with Grailerstau. So he's someone who's crossover into ETH. He's really focused on making cool physicals. I think he's really an fxhash OG that everyone needs to check out. Absolutely. Yeah. So.
Yeah, I think that was, fantastic. Trinity and Will, we covered so many amazing names, so many fantastic collections. I think it's a great intro, right, for newcomers to the platform. And again, if anybody is listening, you will have the links to all the collections, all the names in the description. And I think we can wrap it up. I mean, any closing thoughts on the launch week? Anything you are specifically looking forward to? Any collections that you're interested in? Any artists from the calendar? There are over 80 so far. I think it would be easily over 100 people, new collections on the first week of the launch. Any of those are intriguing? Which one are you looking forward to?
I don't think we have to kick this off with Blockenduce by Peter Pasma as a part of the, I guess, the tender collaboration / curation. Peter Pasma is a crazy code wizard. I'm assuming that this will be an on-chain project. It's under 10 kilobytes of code. Like, you can't do anything in 10 kilobytes these days, but it's a crazy looking skeuomorphic project that takes me really back to the mid 2000 teens. Absolutely insane. It's up in the calendars. Take a look at it. Very excited to see how that one does. Very unique from Peter.
Yeah. And I'll shout out like Tectonica from Protocell Labs. It's a project that we've been following for, I feel like 6 months now on Twitter, and it's finally up there in the calendar. I think also for people coming from ETH, they might be excited to hear that Takawo is dropping a project called Snail Trails. I don't think it's going to be on the first day, but I know that that's an artist that has not come to fxhash, but has quite a bit of a following outside of the ecosystem. So that's going to be a nice first there.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Trinity, Will, thanks so much for your time. Everybody, tune in to Waiting to Be Signed if you haven't. If you want to get deep dives into generative art and fxhash as well. I'm a big fan of their show, and so glad we could do this. We should do this more often, guys. Thanks so much.
Absolutely.
We're here for it.
Yeah. Thanks, Carlo.
Thank you.